Hi everyone, welcome back. As you can see, I'm in a somewhat different environment. I really didn't feel like being inside today, so I decided to record in my garden. That means the sound quality is going to be a little bit not as good as it usually is, but hopefully the vibes will compensate for that. I want to just dive right in today because I feel like we're already at the beginning of November. If you live in the States, then it's around the corner from the elections, and this has been a particularly intense moment as we move toward an election. It's always tense, but it's at another level right now. And so I actually wanted to continue a conversation that I brought up, I believe, the first episode about leadership. A friend of mine commented on that episode and was just saying that he would love to talk about it more. That he hadn't considered this idea of like us putting a specific type of pressure on our leaders to fulfill our unmet childhood needs. Yeah, word. I mean, I hadn't thought about that either until I read The Myth of Normal, but it really made a lot of sense to me when I read that. And it's been helpful because I think that, particularly as we move towards this election where a lot of people are not happy with either candidate, and are considering kind of like voting for a third party or not voting at all, it feels important to remember that there is no such thing as a perfect leader, that any leader is just going to also be human, and that we are going to have to interface with them and engage with them and challenge them and encourage them regardless. I feel like this moment has the potential to awaken a lot of people back to their kind of like community active selves and to stop being so passive. I think that part of the pain that a lot of people are feeling is like just maybe the disillusionment about our government for some folks, and this realization that like, oh, maybe I've been super passive and have kind of been leaning on the United States government as this like strong patriarchal figure that, we would want to perfectly guide us into a future. And that's just not realistic considering the history of this country. However, for me, I personally don't feel like it's a lost cause. I just feel like we have a real responsibility to be strategic and to not have perfect politics, and to know that our values are going to be useful as we strategize steps forward. So I talk a lot about the complexities of being a human being, and I think one of those complexities I've been sitting with recently is the responsibility that we have to our personal interior lives, as well as the responsibility, plural, that we have to our communities and the rest of the world. And it's this constant tension between like, what do I need and how do I need to show up so that the rest of the world can keep moving forward? Like, how can I not be so selfish that I think I only need to take care of myself, but how can I also not be eclipsed by everything that's happening around me in the world, that I forget about myself? It's a balancing act. What helps me with that is to think about my own lineages as like the first base of expanding beyond my own body, right? So rather than thinking necessarily about all of the things I'm obligated to in this moment in time, I'm thinking about everything that I'm connected to, past and future, and how I can hold myself accountable to that. What are the things that my ancestors started working on, their gifts, their failures. And that kind of relates to what I was talking about in the last episode around celebrity culture, right? Which is, really reckoning with importance and value and how to make meaning out of our own lives without feeling like we need to have like millions of followers or be hyper visible, and learning how to understand the nuances of impact. And so I've been thinking about my own lineages, right? and how, like, if I can kind of narrow down my responsibility a little bit to what my ancestors have been working through and connecting myself to their struggles and to the things that, to their dreams, and how can I see that as like a guide and a through line to kind of keep me aligned and moving forward. For me, it's a lot less daunting than trying to take on everything everywhere all at once. Like, we have so much access to so much information at all times, and it's truly too much. We're actually not, like, naturally wired physiologically as humans, though we may evolve into some cyborg version that can handle it. I don't know. But at this point in time, we're not prepared to handle all of this, to know everything, to be everywhere, to do everything. We have to be able to break it down. And I think when we think about like politics and governance, there's this idea that works around like creating small communities where you can live according to a certain set of values. Now we're at the point where it's like much more complicated than that for so many reasons that I don't need to get into. But I think when it comes to this election, we honestly do have a responsibility to vote. I think it's too easy to let our anger just like eclipse what's possible. And I think what's helpful for me is kind of recognizing that time operates differently sometimes than we immediately feel it does. Like, when you look at a film, right, from the 60s and it's black and white and they're wearing all these different clothes and they're speaking differently, it can feel really far away. It can feel like it was a long time ago. But then, to put it in context, 30 years later was when I was born, not that long ago. I think it would benefit us to remember that these moments that feel so far away are actually quite close, which means that we're still in a more intimate relationship with those struggles. For me, that gives me hope because it reminds me that this is not some ongoing thing that's never changed from the past and that never will change and that we need to like explode everything in order for it to change. It reminds me to look at the things that have evolved since then and remember that some changes happen slowly over time. And I do believe personally that there is opportunity for a lot of amazing changes in this moment if we're able to kind of stay cool and collected and strategic and take things one step at a time and really just like vote for the candidates that are going to get us the best foot forward, for example. And then also using this as an opportunity to remember like, hey, maybe by the next election, let's be more prepared so that we can actually vote into office the people that we really are passionate about. Change does happen and change has happened. I saw a film called Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat at the AFI Film Fest, and it was a really amazing film. Specifically, it was talking a lot about like Lumumba and the Congo and the ways that artists, black artists in the States, were used by the CIA as cover for all of these like covert missions that they had trying to overthrow the government there, which is insane. But one of the things that really stood out to me, even though it wasn't at all the point of the film, is that you're looking at these images, right? Once again, most of them in black and white. You're looking at these images of these UN meetings, and they're racially diverse at that point because of all of the battles fought for it to be more equitable in that way, but it's just a sea of men. And I don't have an issue with men. I'm like, is that true? But for me, it's so obvious that there's no way we're going to be in balance as a species if we only have one gender in charge of leadership. There's no way that could possibly be balanced. And it made sense to me. I was like, no wonder we've been stuck in certain cycles and patterns. And I do believe that we're trying to crawl our way out of that. And I don't necessarily believe that like women are going to save the day or non-binary folks are inherently going to save the day. I think it's more to have an understanding that like, okay, we can look at the past. We don't have to romanticize it. We can actually learn from the successes and failures, and we can keep moving forward. One of my critiques of the ways that we look at, for example, socialism or even capitalism, honestly, any of these systems, I don't really think that we found a system that accurately reflects all of the things that we really want in a balanced way. I, have spent a lot of time in Cuba. I studied abroad there. I worked on a film there. I know that while there are tremendous, beautiful things that came from the Cuban Revolution, there's also a lot of shit. I think that any system is susceptible to that, and we owe it to ourselves to not pedestalize anything, as I said in the last episode, and be really thoughtful and loving and critical as we dream forward. And I really do believe that this is an opportunity for us to be doing that versus practicing perfect politics and being super black and white about things, which ultimately just keeps us at a head and keeps us, battling each other like this versus working together. So that's my spiel about leadership. Please vote. Please vote. Another thing that really stuck out to me when I was thinking about this leadership question and like woman and feminism is remembering what Gabor Mate said in The Myth of Normal, where he's like, if we centered mothers, the whole world would look different. If we actually centered the healing of mothers, the whole world would look different. And the child rearing in those early years. So I really hope that we won't get lost in these narrow-minded ideas of what revolution looks like and think that it can only happen through violence or through force or through systems that have really been like, we were born into that violence, and so that's all we know. I just want us to be self-reflective as a species and understand that we have our blinders on based on what history has shown us so far. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I personally refuse to believe that the only pathways are the ones that we've already explored. In fact, I imagine that they're not. I want to keep this episode on the shorter side, though I will be posting on Substack sometime next week. So if you don't already, you can follow me there. And I am going to do a bit of a tarot read before I hang up the phone. But I think that, the real message for me of this moment is, one, finding that balance between the internal and the external and making sure that we are doing the work to stay regulated and stay aligned and stay connected to our own lineages and connected to our own personal lineage healing work as we also engage with the world at large and all of these major issues, because nothing is going to happen by brute force that is sustainable and lasting. And we have to stop undermining the influence of subtlety and the influence of our own lives, even if they're not standing from a soapbox yelling out into the ethers. Like when I was sitting in that film in Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, I was thinking a lot about my ancestors and just remembering stories that I know about them and the battles that they fought. I was thinking just a lot about all of their histories, and the thought came to mind like, you cannot tell me that those stories don't matter. Maybe everyone doesn't know their names, but they impacted deeply the world. And I think we have this habit of, only centering the stories of these select few. That's not to diminish their impact, because it's real, but there's different types of impact. And I think if we look back into our own histories and our own lineages, there's so much to learn and there's so much to build upon. That's really, really, really valuable work. Like, you cannot tell me that my ancestors' stories don't matter. And like, when you look at the historical footage of all of these moments, there's so many people there that are built into those moments who are nameless, but they're not unimportant. And I imagine that in each of your lives, you may have things that you've never explored in your own lineages that might tell you about certain pain points or things that can be healed or things that can be worked through. And I imagine that all of it connects to the bigger picture of the things that we're facing right now, because how could it not? I mean, we as a species are in this moment of like hyper development technologically, and it's kind of scary and exciting in some ways. I think it's not exciting to me necessarily, but I see other people having this type of excitement. And at the same time, like, our planet is doing what it needs to do in order to adjust to all of our consumption habits. And the way that the planet is responding is not in a way that will particularly work for humans' survival. So it's kind of this thing where, like, maybe in the recent history, past 400 or 500 years, whatever, we've been able to just be in these like tribal duels and like colonialism and like trying to take land and do all this shit. But now is actually I feel now is the moment where if we don't actually start to decenter humans and start working together, like, our species is just not going to survive. So it's food for thought, like, we really do have the opportunity and also the responsibility to move very, very differently. So in the work of decentering humans, I invite you to go and listen to some natural body that you live nearby. It might feel silly if that's not something you've ever practiced, and I know that's not accessible for everyone, which is fucked up. But if it is accessible to you, if there's a river or the ocean or a park or a neighbor's garden or a tree, even like a single tree that is nearby you, I invite you to go and sit with that body and just listen. If you can make a practice out of that, 10 minutes once a week, and then build that way up to a daily practice, I guarantee your perception of all of this might shift, and that there might be some new wisdom that is brought to you. So I think that's all I have to say today. So I'm going to pull some tarot and then see what comes up. And natural bodies. What guidance and wisdom do you have for my community listening? What guidance and wisdom do you have for the collective at this time to keep us in alignment with the higher good of this human project? Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, okay. I really love doing this stuff. And also, I now accept bookings for tarot readings, so I will link that below if you're interested. But we have, first of all, the 5 of Pentacles, the 7 of Cups, the 2 of Cups, Sun, the Devil, and at the bottom of the deck, the 6 of Cups. So once again, this kind of just feels like it is affirming everything that I'm saying. The Five of Pentacles and the Seven of Cups talks about scarcity. It talks about, being in a really negative position that feels dire. Seven of Cups talks about choices, and it talks about not all of the choices being what you think they will be, and to be really careful about the decisions that we're making, to be careful of illusions, and to know that the cups that we choose to invest in really make a difference. The Two of Cups talks about harmony. Sometimes it talks about union, but in this case, as you can see, the cards have this one light cup and one shadow cup. And so it speaks to balance and duality, and it speaks to finding harmony and integration between both sides of ourselves, which I was talking about, finding balance between the internal and the external. And this to me really actually speaks of emotional balance and making sure that we're taking the time to harmonize our emotions so that we can make those choices from a place that isn't fear-based, that isn't scarcity-based, because it really will make a difference in this moment. So then we have the Devil and the Sun. The Devil talks about temptation and addictions, and the Sun can talk about optimism, but also can be just illuminating anything that needs to be illuminated. And so I think, one perspective for this moment is that a lot of the stuff that we're working through is stuff that really needed to be illuminated. We're dealing with issues that have been an ongoing problem for a long time, though some people were not aware of it. And, also when I think about the Devil, I think about the temptation that we have to consume and to continue to live our lives in a certain type of way that's not necessarily sustainable. So we kind of have a responsibility, rather than being perfect in our politics or anything like that, to really consider what are all of the ways that I personally am complicit, and how can I not use that to shame myself, but rather to humanize myself and to humanize others, and to recognize that we are all part of this same battle. Now, the bottom of the deck energy is the Six of Cups, which can talk about reconciliation, but also can talk, for me, a lot of times it comes up when it's dealing with childhood wounds, which is funny enough. When I talked about leadership on that first episode, and I was talking about the ways that we expect our leaders to fulfill all of the unmet needs and expectations of our parents, this absolutely rings true once again. And so maybe, the invitation is to sit with that. Maybe if you're questioning your vote, or you're questioning your relationship to this moment, it's worthwhile to take 5 to 10, 15 minutes and just reflect on, what is my relationship to leadership in general? What are all of the ways that I've been abandoned by it or betrayed by it? And how is that impacting the way that how is that impacting my sense of trust in this moment? And that is deeply healing work, just to reflect on those things, and to make sure that when we're making our decisions moving forward, it's not coming from a place of wounding. Because there is a lot of wounding right now in many, many different ways. Wounding currently happening, past wounding coming to the surface. But I think we owe it to ourselves to not get stuck in this blaming, shaming thing, and instead to learn how to practice genuine accountability at a personal level, at a family level, at a community level, and at an institutional, organizational, government level, versus thinking that something is going to come in, save the day, be perfect. We can't eradicate anyone else's perspective or opinion, but we do owe it to ourselves to learn how to cooperate and create a livable world for all of us, regardless of difference, rather than expecting everyone to kind of fall in line in this one particular way. And sometimes that means compromise. Sometimes that means, looking at the bigger picture of what is necessary right now in order to maybe take a step towards the bigger dream. So I just wanted to kind of put out some of my thoughts, hoping that it might be helpful. And as always, feel free to follow me on Substack or on TikTok, Instagram, where I try to post like pretty much just a few times a month in order to maintain my personal commitment to being present in my own physical material reality. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'm wishing you all of the warmth and sweetness through this very challenging but hopefully beautifully transformative moment. And I'll see you next time.